Hello students, welcome to my live teaching learning session of MMPC 010 Managerial Economics. Today is the third session of this paper. In first session, we have discussed about what is managerial economics and what is the nature and scope of managerial economics and what type of branch we study in managerial economics. You know that economics has two branches mainly. One is microeconomics and other is macroeconomics. In microeconomics, we study about individual units of the economy, like individual consumer, individual seller, price of single commodity, individual firm, or an industry. So managerial economics studies about individual units of the economy. That's why the the theory of microeconomics, all the principles and the theory of microeconomics is related with managerial economics. In second session, we have discussed about theory of demand. You know that demand play very important role in microeconomics, and demand generally related to consumers' behavior. It studies about consumer behavior, how consumer is willing to buy goods and services at lower prices in more quantity and at higher prices in less quantity. What is demand? Demand refers to the quantity of a commodity which consumer is willing to buy at a given price and at a given time period. That is called demand. And we have discussed in previous session determinants of demand, law of demand, and why demand curve is downward sloping. What are the reasons behind this downward sloping demand curve? In today's session, we will discuss about elasticity of demand and forecasting of demand. Why demand forecasting play very important role in managerial economics. Why a business entrepreneur must know about demand analysis and why demand is helpful in the production of goods and services. And what do you mean by elasticity of demand? What are the different types of elasticity of demand and how we can measure it? And what are the determinant factors of elasticity of demand? All these topics we will cover in today's session. So let us start from first topic, elasticity of demand. What is the meaning of elasticity of demand? Elasticity means responsiveness degree of change in any variable. You know that demand is inversely related with price. When price rises, demand falls. When price falls, demand rises. So demand is related with price. And what is the relationship between demand and price? There is an inverse relationship. There is a negative relationship between price and demand. Law of demand only tells us about this inverse relationship or negative relationship between price and demand. But if we want to estimate how much change in price will affect the change in quantity demanded, it can be measured with the help of this concept, elasticity of demand. So elasticity of demand refers to the responsiveness change in quantity demanded due to percentage change in price of a commodity. And there are three types of elasticity of demand. One is price elasticity of demand. Second is income elasticity of demand. Third is cross elasticity of demand. So there are three types of elasticity of demand. One is price elasticity, second is income elasticity, and third is cross elasticity of demand. Now, price elasticity of demand means the percentage change in quantity of a commodity that is associated with a 1% change in price. If percentage change in price affects the percentage change in quantity demanded, the ratio in between of this percentage change in quantity demanded and percentage change in price is known as price elasticity of demand. If the percentage change in quantity is greater than the percentage change in price, then we will say that demand is more elastic. In simple words, if we say that what is the meaning of elasticity? If anything can be increase or decrease, if any variable can change, it means that have elasticity. If any variable can't change due to change in other variable, it will be called inelastic. Like rubber band is elastic. You can increase or decrease the size of rubber band, but thread is inelastic. You can't increase or decrease the length of the thread. So thread is inelastic, which can't change, but the thing which can change, that is called elastic. So if there is a change in demand can possible due to change in percentage change in price, then demand will be called elastic. And if the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than the percentage change in price, then demand will be called inelastic or less elastic. So elasticity concept is very important to understand how much change in demand will occur due to change in price level. For example, if price increases from 10 rupees to 20 rupees, the initial demand is at 10 rupees price is, for example, is 100. And if price increases from 10 to 20, then what will be the change in demand? If demand decreases by 50, 100 to 50. If price double, then demand will be half. So we can calculate elasticity of demand with the help of formula. The formula is, first formula is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. And the other formula is delta Q. Delta Q refers to change in quantity. And delta P refers to change in price. So if delta Q is divided by delta P into P upon Q, this P means initial price of the commodity. Initial price, you know that price is 10 and initial quantity is 100. So P upon Q means 10 upon 100. And the change in quantity is quantity 100 is initial, and after increasing the price level, quantity falls from 100 to 50. It means change in quantity is 50 and change in price is 10 to 20 means the difference is 10. So we can calculate elasticity of demand by using this formula, and it will tell us that if answer is 1, then demand will be unitary elastic. If answer is less than 1, then demand will be called less elastic. If answer is more than 1, like 1.1, 1.2 or 1.5 or any other thing like 2, 3, 4, etc., that will be called more elastic demand or greater than unitary elastic. If answer is 0, then demand will be inelastic. If answer is infinity, then demand will be perfectly elastic. So we can measure or estimate elasticity of demand by using the given formulas like percentage change in quantity demanded upon percentage change in price, and the other formula is delta Q upon delta P into P upon Q. So elasticity of demand mainly tells us about the percentage change in quantity demanded due to percentage change in price. That is called price elasticity of demand. And it may be more elastic, it may be less elastic. Now next is calculating elasticities. Now how elasticity of demand can be calculated? What is the price elasticity of demand in between of A and B? You know that demand curve is always downward sloping curve from left to right. Here this is the demand curve. Now on this demand curve, B, C and A point is mentioned. C is the midpoint of this demand curve, and A and B, there are 2 points, and in between of these 2 points C point is mentioned. And what is C point referring here? C point is the midpoint. And if you calculate elasticity of demand, then you can use this formula, percentage change in quantity demanded upon percentage change in price. Now next is here the next formula is percentage change in quantity demanded means initial quantity demanded and another quantity which increase or decrease due to change in price level. The difference in between of two quantities is called delta Q, and the difference in between of two prices is called delta P. If next price 10, if one price is given 10 and other price is given 14, then we will take 10 minus 14 upon half. Q2 plus Q1 means 10 plus 14, and if P2 is given 26 and P1 is given 20, then 26 minus 20 upon 26 plus 26 plus 20, and in the beginning we will write half. Then what will we get? Here minus sign we can ignore because we know that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So there is no need to put a minus sign here. So we can ignore it because we know that there is a negative or inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. If the answer is 1.27, if answer is greater than 1, then demand will be called greater than unitary elastic or more than unitary elastic. If answer comes only 1, that will be called unitary elastic. If answer is 0, it means demand is inelastic. If answer is infinity, then demand will be called perfectly elastic. So we can estimate elasticity of demand by using this formula. Now next is demand elasticity is a measure that shows how a change in quantity demanded responds to a change in price. Economists say that demand is elastic when a given change in price causes a relatively larger change in quantity demanded. Elastic goods and services generally have plenty of substitutes. Or in other words, we can say that if there are many substitutes available, if we use one commodity for another, then demand will be more elastic. But in case of complementary goods like car and petrol, if you have car, then you must need petrol because both goods are interrelated with each other. They can't use without any other thing. In this case, demand will be called inelastic or demand cannot change. So demand is elastic if demand can change. If demand cannot change due to change in price level, demand will be called inelastic. So demand elasticity show the measurement, or it is the responsiveness degree of change in quantity demanded due to change in price. So this elastic word shows that demand, how much change in demand will occur due to change in price. If demand changes more than change in price level, demand will be more elastic. If demand changes less than the change in price level, demand will be relatively less elastic. And if demand remains constant, not increase or not decrease, it means the demand will be inelastic. Now next is income elasticity of demand. Same as price elasticity of demand, we can estimate income elasticity of demand. Here we will measure the responsiveness degree of change in quantity demanded due to change in income of the consumer, not by the change in price level. In case of price elasticity of demand, we take the change in demand due to change in price level. But in case of income elasticity of demand, we will measure the elasticity of demand with reference to the income of the consumer. So its simple formula is that income elasticity of demand is equals to percentage change in quantity demanded of a commodity divided by percentage change in income of the consumer. You know that income is the main determinant factor of demand. Income affects our demand. If income increases, our purchasing power will also increase and we can purchase more goods and services. It means our demand will increase due to increase in income level. If income falls, our demand will falls. So income can change our demand. So income play very important role to change in demand or to determine the demand level. Here there are 5 degrees of income elasticity of demand. One is highly elastic, second is unitary elastic, third is low elastic, fourth is zero elastic, and fifth is negative elastic. So income elasticity of demand may be highly elastic when our demand can change more due to less change in income of the consumer. If income changes less but demand changes more, then demand will be more elastic. In this case, demand curve will be upward sloping. Why this demand curve is upward sloping? Because you know that due to rise in income, our demand rises, and fall in income falls our demand. So there is a positive and direct relationship between income and demand for a commodity. And goods may be inferior, goods may be superior, goods may be necessary. So if goods are luxurious or comfortable goods, then demand curve will be upward sloping, and in case of luxurious goods, demand will be highly elastic and its slope will be positive. If demand and income of the consumer changes proportionately or by the same ratio, then demand will be called unitary elastic. In other words, we can say that if there is a percentage change in demand and the percentage change in income, both are same, both are equal, then demand will be unitary elastic. For example, if percentage change in demand is 10% and percentage change in income is also 10%, then what will be we get? 1, that is unitary elastic. If the percentage change in demand is 20% and the percentage change in income is 10%, then answer will be 2, that is highly elastic. And in case of lower elastic, if percentage change in demand is 10% and percentage change in demand is income is 20%, then answer will be 0.5, that is called less elastic or less than unitary elastic. If income elasticity of demand is zero elastic, it means it will be the situation of necessary goods. Necessary goods are those goods which consumer definitely buy, either its income rises or falls. It means if income will not affect the demand for a commodity, then demand will be called inelastic. If income increases, you know that demand for salt, demand for wheat, demand for rice, demand for sugar, demand for milk, these are necessary products. And consumer definitely buy these products for survival. Either income rises or falls, either if price rises or falls. If consumer's income rises, then he will not buy too much quantity of salt. He will buy the quantity of salt according to his need. So in this case, if goods are necessary, then income will not affect the demand level of the consumer. So in this case, demand will be called zero elastic. Demand will be zero, or elasticity of demand will be zero. In this case, curve will be vertical shape curve, which is parallel to the y-axis. Now, in case of inferior goods, inferior goods are those goods which shows negative relationship between income and demand for a commodity. If consumer's income increases, then consumer will purchase less unit of inferior goods and vice versa. In case of inferior goods, demand curve slope will be negative because due to rise in income, demand for inferior goods fall, and fall in income will leads to increase in demand. So in this case, demand curve will be downward sloping, and here elasticity of demand is negative elastic. So there are 5 degrees of income elasticity of demand. One is highly elastic in case of luxuries or comfortable goods, unitary elastic when the demand, change in demand and change in income both are same in ratio, then unitary elastic demand will occur. Next is low elastic. If demand changes less than the change in price, then it will be called low elastic or less elastic. And in case of necessary goods, income elasticity of demand will be inelastic or zero elastic. And in case of inferior goods, demand will be negatively elastic. These are 5 degrees. Now next is elastic demand. Elastic demand means when there are so many options are available, then demand will be called highly elastic. If so many substitutes are available, then demand will be called more elastic. Generally, elastic demand tells us the change in demand. How much change in demand is possible due to change in price of the commodity, due to change in income of the consumer, or due to change in price of another commodity. So if we assume that there are so many housing options, it is easy for people to not have to pay more than they want to. So in this case, demand will be called highly elastic. And elasticity of demand can be estimated by using this formula: percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price of the commodity. Now next is, this is the diagram of highly elastic demand and relatively less elastic demand. PED means price elasticity of demand. P refers to price, ED refers to elasticity of demand. Its formula is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. If demand is more elastic, then curve will be downward sloping but more flatter in nature. And if demand is less elastic, then curve will be steeper in shape. So we can draw steeper shape curve which represent relatively inelastic demand. And we can draw highly elastic or flatter shape curve which shows higher elasticity of demand. So these are two diagrams which representing the different levels of demand. With the diagram which is more flatter, that is highly elastic demand is showing, and the diagram which is steeper in nature, that is showing relatively inelastic demand. Now next is, this is the relationship between total revenue, TR, MR and profit curve. This is the diagram of demand curve. You know that demand curve slope is always downward. And AR is showing average revenue, MR is always showing marginal revenue. If demand is, if this is the diagram of first diagram is showing AR, first downward sloping line. This line is demand curve. Demand curve we can represent it by AR. A means average, R is revenue. Average revenue is always equals to price. Now what is revenue? Revenue is the total earning or total income received by the seller after selling its product. So AR is always equals to price because AR is estimated by dividing total revenue to quantity, and total revenue is equals to price into quantity. If price into quantity divided by quantity, then quantity will be cancelled. What will we get? Only price. So AR is always equals to price. And you know that when AR is falling, then MR falls before than AR. So MR remains always lower than AR curve. Now, in between of this line, this point, now next diagram is showing total revenue curve. And this reverse U-shaped curve is also called profit curve. Total revenue is the total amount or total money income received by the seller after selling its output. Total revenue curve in the beginning is increases, after that it becomes maximum, and at last it start falling. Where total revenue is maximum, at this point AR and MR will be 0 and AR point is this. Here elasticity of demand is equals to unitary or equals to 1, and below this point elasticity of demand will be less elastic or inelastic, and if we go beyond that 1, then demand will be more elastic. So at this point where MR is 0, TR is maximum and AR is this, at this point here unitary elastic demand we can show, and if we go above this point, then elasticity of demand will be highly elastic, and if we go below this point, then elasticity of demand will be less elastic. So where total revenue is falling at T point, here total revenue is 0 and here AR is also 0. So in this case demand is less elastic or inelastic. So this is the relationship between TR, AR and MR, and with the help of revenue curve we can show elasticity of demand. Next is the price elasticity of demand and its determinants. Now what are the various determinants of price elasticity of demand, or how we can estimate this price elasticity of demand? What factors affects this price elasticity of demand? Demand tends to be more elastic if there are so many close substitutes are available. If substitutes are available, then consumer demand can change. Consumer demand can vary due to change in price of the product. For example, tea and coffee, these two goods are substitutable goods. And at present, there are so many types of goods are available which are closely related to other products. If there are a larger number of close substitutes available in the market, then demand will be highly elastic. If the good is a luxurious goods, then demand will be more elastic. If more narrowly defined the market, if there are only single market exist in the economy, then demand will be less elastic. And if there are a large number of markets available in the market in the economy, then demand will be more elastic. And time period also affects the demand of a commodity. If there is a long time period, demand can easily change. In long run, demand is highly elastic, and in short time period, demand is less elastic. Now next is coefficient of price elasticity of demand along a linear demand curve. If single straight line demand curve is given, how we can estimate elasticity of demand and how demand varies at different points on this straight line demand curves. For a straight line demand curve, the price elasticity of demand varies along this curve. Price elasticity of demand along a straight line demand curve will vary. At high price, a reduction in price will have an elastic price response. Lower prices cause total revenue to rise. So demand is price inelastic at lower prices and demand is price elastic at higher prices. So this is the downward sloping demand curve. On this point on this curve, there are 4 points here which is mentioned. If we take a point which lies in between of this curve center or midpoint, at this midpoint of this line, demand will be equals to unitary or equals to 1. And if we go above this point, then demand will be highly or greater than 1, highly elastic. If we go below this point, below this midpoint, then demand will be less than 1 or less elastic. And at on x-axis, demand will be inelastic, and on y-axis, if we take any point, then demand will be highly elastic or perfectly elastic. So on a straight line demand curve, demand varies in between of 0 and infinity. 0 represent inelastic demand, infinity represent highly elastic demand or perfectly elastic demand. On y-axis, demand will be perfectly elastic. On x-axis, if any point we take, then demand will be 0 or inelastic. At the midpoint of this curve, demand will be unitary elastic. Above this midpoint, demand will be greater than 1. And at the below this midpoint, demand will be less than 1 or less elastic. So demand varies on a straight line demand curve in between of which range? 0 and infinity. And we can estimate elasticity of demand with the help of using point method formula. Lower part of the point divided by, or in other words, we can say that lower segment upon upper segment. If we use this formula, lower segment upon upper segment, then we can estimate elasticity of demand by point method or by geometric method or by graphic method. Next is price elasticity of demand. There are 5 degrees of price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand maybe relatively highly elastic, relatively less elastic, inelastic, or greater than 1, less than 1, unitary elastic. So there are 5 degrees of price elasticity of demand. In first case, if demand curve is parallel to the y-axis, in this case demand will be called perfectly inelastic. A good is have perfectly inelastic demand if a change in its price will cause no change in quantity demanded. If quantity demanded remains constant, either price rise or falls, then demand will be called inelastic. For example, life saving drugs or medicines. Medicines demand is a necessary demand, and in case of necessary product, demand always remains constant. It will not change due to change in price or due to change in income of the consumer. So in this case, demand will be called perfectly inelastic and curve will be parallel to the y-axis. Now next is relatively inelastic demand. An increase from P1 to P2 if price increases by more ratio but demand changes by less than the change in price level, it will be called less elastic demand. Or in other words, if demand curve is steeper, then demand will be called relatively inelastic demand. An increase from P1 to P2 will cause a smaller change in quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. So demand is not very much responsive to change in price level. For example, petrol, alcohol, tobacco, these goods are called less responsive goods. So in this case, demand will be relatively inelastic. Now next is unitary elastic of demand. If there is a same change in demand and change in price, if the ratio in between of change in price and change in demand both are equal or both are same, then curve will be normal downward sloping curve. It is also known as rectangular hyperbola curve, which shows that elasticity of demand will remain always equals to 1 or unitary at any point on this demand curve. Now next is relatively elastic demand. If demand is more elastic or highly elastic, if the percentage change in quantity demanded is more than the percentage change in price. If price change is less but the change in demand is more, then demand will be called highly elastic. And if demand for such goods is very responsive to price, then demand will be highly elastic, curve will be more flatter but downward sloping. Now fifth situation is perfectly elastic demand. If there is no change in price, only quantity demanded is changing, then demand will be called perfectly elastic. Situation when price elasticity of demand is equals to infinity, customers are prepared to buy all they can of a product only at one price. Any increase in price will cause demand to fall to zero. For example, any homogeneous product with many substitutes like potatoes, vegetables, in this case, if price remains constant, demand can increase or decrease. That is called perfectly elastic demand. So these are 5 degrees of price elasticity of demand. Now next is demand elasticity formula. You know that there are 3 types of elasticity of demand. One is price elasticity of demand, second is income elasticity of demand, and third is cross elasticity of demand. And the income elasticity of demand formula is change in quantity demanded or percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in income of the consumer. Or other formula is delta Q upon delta Y into into Y upon Q. In economics, income is represented by Y, or you can write I delta D upon D divided by delta I upon I. Delta D is change in demand, D is initial demand, Delta I is change in income of the consumer, and I is income of the initial income of the consumer. And price elasticity of demand formula is delta D upon D, change in demand divided by demand upon change in price divided by initial price. Next is cross elasticity of demand. What is cross elasticity of demand? Cross elasticity of demand shows that percentage change in quantity demanded of a product. If one commodity's demand we will take, if one commodity demand varies due to change in other commodities price, this is called cross elasticity of demand. For example, price of coffee will affect the demand for tea. Price of car will affect the price of petrol, demand for petrol. So this is called cross elasticity of demand, and its formula is EXY. Here E is elasticity of demand, XY, these two are different products. It may be substitute, may be complementary, or substitute or complementary products. We can say that these two products are related goods. In single word, if we use in place of substitute or complementary, we can write related goods prices. If price of related goods affects the demand for other goods, that is called cross elasticity of demand. So percentage change in quantity demanded of X product divided by percentage change in price of product Y. If we assume that X product is tea and Y product is coffee, if X product is car and Y product is petrol, so we can estimate cross elasticity of demand. Next is income elasticity of demand. You know that a measure of how demand for a product changes when people's income changes. Income elasticity of demand, we have discussed that there are 5 degrees of income elasticity of demand, but mainly 3 degrees are most important. One is negative, which is applicable in case of inferior goods. Next is positive, which is applicable in case of comfortable goods or luxurious goods. And next is 0 in case of necessary or which is very necessary goods which demand cannot change due to change in income of the consumer. In this case, elasticity of demand will be 0 or inelastic demand. So negative elasticity of demand associated with inferior goods, for example, cheap cars. When my income rises, I stop buying cheap cars. And positive relationship associated with luxurious goods. For example, when my income rises, I buy more vacations abroad. And 0 elasticity of demand, these are sticky goods, or for example like electricity and water, salt, cooking oil and kerosene. These are very necessary goods. So in this case, demand will not change due to change in income of the consumer. Demand will be inelastic. In case of elasticity of demand will be equals to 0. So these are 3 degrees of income elasticity of demand. Now next is cross elasticity of demand. You know that there are 2 types of goods. One is substitutable, other is complementary. If there are close substitutes are available, small rise in price of X commodity will cause larger rise in demand for Y commodity. In this case, demand curve will be highly elastic. And if there are weak substitute or less substitutes are available, then larger rise in price of one commodity will leads to small increase in demand. Curve will be steeper shape curve, but demand curve will always be upward sloping curve in case of substitute goods. For example, if price of coffee rises, then people will substitute in place of coffee, people will prefer to buy more tea. So if price of coffee rises, then demand for tea will rise. So there is a positive relationship between one commodity's price and other commodity's demand. So curve will be upward sloping. But if close substitutes are available, then curve will be more flatter. If weak substitutes are available or less substitutes are available, curve will be more steeper in nature. Next is Computing the price elasticity of demand, as you know that price elasticity of demand can be estimated by using this formula delta Q upon delta P into P by Q. For example, if the price of an ice cream cone increases from 2 to 2 rupees 20 paisa and the amount you buy falls from 10 to 8 cones, then elasticity of demand, how you can calculate elasticity of demand by using midpoint formula. Its formula is delta Q by delta P into P1 plus P0 upon Q1 plus Q0. There is a midpoint formula you can write down like delta Q is change in quantity upon delta P means change in price into P1 plus P0. It means if we add both the price of the product divided by Q1 plus Q0. Q1 is another quantity and Q0 is initial quantity. So this is the formula of calculating elasticity of demand by using midpoint method. Next is price elasticity of demand in action. If we take an example, like W.S. Smith have recently reduced the price of its Kobo Mini e-reader from $60 to 40 pound. They predict their sales of the e-reader will increase from 15,000 units a month to 25,000 a month. It means demand is more elastic. If due to fall in price, demand increases, that is called highly elastic demand. And if there is no change in demand, either price rises or falls, it will be called less elastic or inelastic. So price elasticity generally tells us about the change in demand, how much change in demand will occur due to change in price of the commodity. It is very necessary for the finance minister and international businesses. Elasticity of demand helps in the determination of exports and imports level, and if government want to impose more taxes and if government wants to collect more revenues through taxation, then government will put taxes on those commodities whose demand is necessary or inelastic. So in case of inelastic demand, if government put 10% or 20% taxation, then people will definitely buy that commodity if consumers are habitual for that product, if consumers' demand cannot change due to change in income of the consumer, due to change in price of the consumer, price of the product. In this case, government definitely receive all the revenues through taxation. So government put high taxes, high rate of tax on those goods whose demand is less elastic or inelastic. And for a monopoly market in which only single seller exists, monopoly always charge higher price in market because there are no close substitutes are available. So if no close substitutes are available, you can charge higher prices and you will also get that higher prices because people have no options to buy that product from other place. So if there are larger substitutes available, then you can't charge higher prices from the consumer because consumer's demand can shift from one product to its substitute product. So elasticity of demand is very helpful to estimate how much price a producer can fix for a product and how much tax government can collect by imposing taxation on necessary product or luxurious product or inferior goods product or any other substitute or complementary products. And international trade, you know that petroleum price always increases because OPEC countries know about that the demand for petrol is inelastic for developing countries or those countries who don't have much petrol. So they always rises the price due to inelastic demand of the petroleum products. So elasticity of demand is very helpful in international business, in case of monopoly market, in case of financial minister to determine the taxation rate. That's why we must have to understand this concept elasticity of demand. Now next is, what is demand forecasting? There are different methods of demand forecasting. One is survey method and other is statistical method. Demand forecasting is a very important concept for a manager or any business entrepreneur, because with the help of this demand forecasting concept, we can forecast, we can predict about the demand for a product, and then product planning can be possible and producer can produce products for consumers. So there are two methods which gives help in the determination or determining the demand forecasting. One is survey method and other is statistical method. In survey method, we can take consumer survey or opinion poll method. With the help of these two methods, consumer survey can be possible and demand can be forecasted. And statistical method, we can take trend projection, barometric method, and econometric method. There are three methods: trend, barometric, and econometric. These are statistical methods for demand forecasting. Next is forecasting techniques. There are two types of forecasting techniques. One is qualitative and other is quantitative. Qualitative forecasting is based on opinion and intuitions, and quantitative forecasting uses mathematical models and historical data to make forecasts. Time series models are the most frequently used among all the forecasting models. And regression analysis show the causes and effect relationship, or cause and effect models, which is known as regression model. This assumes that one or more factor, which is independent variable, predict future demand. So these are forecasting techniques. One is qualitative forecasting and other is quantitative forecasting. In quantitative forecasting, time series and cause and effect models we can use. Methods of demand forecasting. Though statistical techniques are essential in clarifying relationship and providing techniques of analysis, they are not substitute for judgment. What is needed in some common sense mean between pure guessing and too much mathematics. One is consumer survey method or survey of buyers' intentions, also known as opinion surveys. It is useful when consumers are industrial producers. However, a number of biases may creep up. Not very useful for household consumers. And its limitation is that passive and does not respond and measures the variable under management control. Next is Delphi method. Delphi method, it consists of an effort to arrive at a consensus in an uncertain area by questioning a group of experts repeatedly until the result appear to converge along a single line of the issue, causing disagreement are clearly defined. It means it's a method in which we can take consist of an efforts to arrive a consensus. If we take consensus from the group of experts and do this work again and again repeatedly to converge along a single line of the issue, causing disagreement are clearly defined, that is called Delphi method. It is developed by Rand Corporation of the USA in 1940s by Olaf, Halmer, Dalkey, and Gordon, useful in technological forecasting, which use non-economic variable. Next is, you know that there are two methods which we can use for demand forecasting. One is qualitative, other is quantitative. In qualitative, Delphi method, Salesforce composite forecast, experts or insider knowledge, surveys, interviews, and focuses on groups and other many other methods we can use. And in quantitative, moving averages, trend projections, seasonal averages, econometric modeling, machine learning, or many more methods we can use. Now, demand forecasting is the best practices process approach. If we want to forecast the demand for a commodity, how much demand will increase or decrease in future, and how much product will be produced by any business entrepreneur or any manufacturing industry, this is very necessary to predict about demand. So generating forecast based on predefined profiles and continuously maintaining those profiles based on performance. Here, this is the graph of this total demand forecast, in which judgment and collaborative forecasting, experimental forecasting, these are different methods of forecasting of demand. Like one is judgment and collaborating forecasting, it is a qualitative method of forecasting. Experimental forecasting, it's also qualitative method for demand forecasting. Time series forecasting is the quantitative method of demand forecasting, and causal forecasting is regression model, in which we explain the cause and effect relationship. So these methods, which is based on qualitative and quantitative, with the help of these two quantitative and qualitative methods, we can forecast the total demand of the product. Now next is demand forecasting method. You know that qualitative method in this surveys, judgmental, this method is related to judgment, or surveys, executive jury method, Salesforce composite, and Delphi method. And if we use combined method, judgment and statistical, like artificial intelligence method, artificial neural networks, experts, group method of data handling, support, belief vector machine, system dynamic, causal loop system, and quantitative method, in which we can use statistical methods or numerically we can express the forecasting of the demand, like causal forecasting. In this we use regression models, econometric models, input output models, and time series like trend pattern analysis, regression analysis, exploratory analysis. Now next is demand forecasting techniques. In trend quantitative methods, in which trend analysis and projection based on past relationship between a business factor related to employment and employment level itself. Next is simple long run trend analysis. It extrapolates past relationship between volume of business activity and the employment levels into the future. Regression analysis regresses employment needs onto key variables, and simulation models uses probabilities of future events to estimate future employment level or future demand of the product. Workload analysis based on actual content of work, and Markov analysis probabilistic based on past relationship between business factor related to employment and employment level itself. So these are different techniques, qualitative and quantitative methods, as we have discussed about that. One is Delphi method, sales team opinion, consumer survey approach, and opinion poll, market research. These are all qualitative methods for demand forecasting. And quantitative methods in this trend projection, barometric, and econometric forecasting model we can use for forecasting the demand. So demand forecasting means estimation of the demand for a good in the forecast period or future period. It is a process of estimating a future event by casting forward past data, and the past data are systematically combined in a predetermined way to obtain the estimate of future demand. So these factors involved in demand forecasting, macro level, industry level, firm level, we can use these three levels for by demand forecasting, and these are elements of demand forecasting or good forecast. Timely demand forecasting should be done timely. It may be more reliable, accurate, meaningful, written, and easy to use. So now we can conclude from today's session that demand, elasticity of demand, forecasting of demand, and the different methods which can use for forecasting the demand is very necessary in any business enterprises. Thank you.
मिला यार भाई प्लीज हाँ सेंड कर दिया ना आपने थैंक यू